This is World Comics Review, and this microphone is plugged in and switched on, and I'm recording. Imagine that, eh? So anyway, this website is Comic Book Plus, which I keep finding and then forgetting and then re-finding, but I've finally gone and memorised the name of it. So what is Comic Book Plus? Well, it's a gigantic archive of free and legal public domain scanned comics and story papers, leaflets, pamphlets, pulps, and even old radio shows, as we can see here. So today we're going to take a look at my real area of interest in comics, which is old British story papers from the 1890s to maybe 1940s. So this is an issue of the Union Jack, the Halfpenny series, number 239, which is from November 1898. So the Union Jack started in 1894 and was originally a halfpenny weekly with 16 pages, as we can see right here. And it was part of a stable of 3 papers. So the first one was called the Halfpenny Marvel, which started in 1893. And then the Union Jack, I think, began around May 1894. And then towards the end of 1894, there was also Pluck, which was pretty similar. So to begin with, there was these 3 papers, and the first few issues of the Union Jack just had one long story over 16 pages. But after a while, it also started to have a serial story, and so a long story and a serial story. So this one is The Heart of the World. So when it began, it had all sorts of adventure and detective and western and those sorts of stories, all changing each week with occasional recurring characters, but always a single story on its own. And it continued as a halfpenny paper until 1904, when it went up to a 1-penny paper, and the numbers were restarted, and it got pink covers and better quality paper and more pages. The pink covers lasted until somewhere into World War I, when they couldn't get the dye anymore, so it just had plain covers. And in 1918 it went up to 1.5 pennies, and then in 1920 it went up to 2 pennies, but it started to have coloured covers, and it ended in 1933. So Union Jack is most famous for being the Sexton Blake's own paper, which started in 1904, not long after the relaunch. For many years people thought that Sexton Blake Detective, which appeared in issue 2 of the first series, was the first ever Sexton Blake story, although actually Sexton Blake started in issue 6 of the Halfpenny Marvel towards the end of 1893. So anyway, let's get into this story, The Heart of the World. So it's a partly sci-fi adventure story. And yeah, this guy is attacked by an octopus. Whoops, wrong button. Right, back to first page. There's an amusing story about that advert on the last page. Okay, so next page. So yeah, this the early halfpenny series didn't have any adverts on the inside covers because the paper was so bad that the ink could go through and ruin the cover. So yeah, just plain inside cover, which somebody's gone to the effort of scanning anyway. Right, so this is the story, The Heart of the World, by Charles Hamilton, who is an absolute legend in British story papers. He wrote most of the stories for the Magnet and the Gem from the 1900s to 1940s, and created the immortal Billy Bunter, amongst many other characters. And this illustration is nothing to do with the beginning of the story, they just kind of randomly scattered them around. So the story opens with 4 adventurers going to Mount Shasta in Northern California. I don't know if that's a real place or not, but anyway, it's an extinct volcano, so they can go down inside and start exploring through caves to try and find the centre of the Earth. And you might be thinking that the centre of the Earth is full of lava, but apparently that at the time that was only a theory, and other people thought the centre of the Earth was a giant ocean or something. Or at least according to this story anyway. I should think actual scientists probably already knew that the centre of the Earth was lava, and then radioactive iron, even back in the 1890s. The 4 adventurers are Dr. Chilton, who's a crazy scientist who wants to gets obsessed with finding the centre of the Earth, and he's gone slightly insane after being tortured on a previous adventure, which I don't think was actually a story that was published in the Union Jack. It's just a part of his backstory. And his young cousin, who's more like his son, called Gerard Chilton, and then 2 servants called Ebony Gem, who you can probably guess is this one, and Corporal Bolt, who just goes duty is duty and doesn't really do much else. So yeah, they start off climbing down inside this mountain in Northern California, and when they get down there, Dr. Chelton reveals that he's invented a type of super bright electric lantern that never runs out of power. Which you think he could just make himself a millionaire with that invention, but never mind. And he's got a bunch of other gadgetry that comes in helpful. So they go through some caves until they eventually find a gigantic chasm, and Dr. Chilton says that an American explorer went there before him and marked part of the way. So they know this chasm's there, but they didn't bring anything across it with. So they lower Gerard down into it, but he gets attacked. Oh, as we see on the cover illustration, an octopus attacks him, and the octopus apparently levitates itself out of the water too. But after a somewhat epic fight with the octopus, eventually they kill it, and go for some more caves until they come to a gigantic underground ocean. And Dr. Chilton's made some kind of swim bladders, which are basically like rubber rings that children use. So they put these on themselves, and the ocean's completely calm and fresh water, so they're swimming across the ocean until they get to Washington Island, which was named by the previous explorer. And on the island they find a footprint, and the Native Americans in the area around the mountain said that they consigned their enemies to the caves sometime in the past. So the descendants of those enemies have become kind of like blind, troglodyte people who live on the islands around this ocean, and they attack the explorers. But the explorers have guns, so they shoot some of these savages. But the savages just shocked by the sound and don't know how their companions were kind of magically killed, so stop chasing them. And they get across the ocean and find another cave which is walled in, but they dynamite that open. Right, during this part of the journey, Gerard starts to worry about Dr. Chilton's mental health because it's getting hotter and hotter, but he's still saying, oh, the theory of internal heat in the Earth is only a theory, so we can still find the center of the Earth. And they're saying, it's just getting dangerous, we might be killed. And he's just saying, well, you can go back if you want, but I want to die as a martyr to science. And they're saying, we're not going to leave you. So they eventually follow him into a cave where the rock is starting to get so hot it's starting to very faintly glow with the heat, and they're really tired out and start dropping their equipment. Obviously, this is another spoiler illustration for later in the story. So yeah, they start dropping their equipment because they're so hot from carrying this stuff, and they eventually come across another chasm that's full of fire. And then there's an earthquake which causes the ceiling to collapse in. So this is the illustration of the ceiling collapsing. And we're trapped. And the Dr. Chilton's, they get into a fight with him and knock him out. Oh, yeah, he's just about to jump into the fiery cavern to become a martyr to science, but they grab him and knock him out, and he just kind of becomes passive after that. And the earthquake blocks them into the cave they were in. But then water from another underground river starts flowing up into the cave, and it goes pouring over here and puts the fire out. So they put on the swim bladders, get carried along this chasm until they come to another gigantic cavern with an underground ocean in. But the water that's carrying them is salt water, so it must have come from the Pacific Ocean. So they put on the swim bladders, and the air isn't becoming compressed or stale, so there's an exit somewhere. So they just put on the swim bladders and spend hours and hours floating upwards. They even fall asleep as they float upwards, and eventually float upwards and find daylight, go swimming along or get carried along by the current and come falling out in a waterfall somewhere else in California. And they meet some gold miners who are panning for gold in the river, and find these crazy British explorers come tumbling out of a waterfall instead. Say, strangers, where are you from? So yeah, that's Dr. Chilton's taken into care and is cured of his insanity for reaching the centre of the Earth. So kind of a fairly typical weird adventure story of the time. And let's see the serial in this issue too. I didn't read this part. Sign of the Scarlet Cross. I guess blah blah blah. They have the serial recap. Pierre Everson, Shaggy, who's a newspaper seller, I guess fighting against some sort of creepy secret society. Next page. Possibly no editor's page in this issue. Oh no, here it is. From the quarterdeck. This is the editor's page. In some of the very first issues, the editor had the whole last page, so the main story was 15 pages long, although it had larger type in the early issues. But yeah, pretty soon in the editors reduced it to just this half a page section, and then he's announcing new stories, giving a logic puzzle for people to try and solve, and talking about stuff of interest to boys like new ships and new naval guns and things like that. Blank inside back cover, and then the adverts on the actual back cover. So the Royal Amoret's a kind of a music box with interchangeable but proprietary metal records. Soon to be entirely swept away by the gramophones that played standardized 78 RPM records. They used to, these people wanted to sell you a music machine that only played their proprietary format. And we come so far, eh? Some puzzle competitions, and this puzzle competition, so a chance to win £21 or silver tea and coffee services. So yeah, £21. I think back then £1 was equivalent to £250 today, so £21 is a really big prize. But unfortunately, this was actually a scam. So you had to finish these sentences, and the answers are kind of obvious, like the Onryo's dream book. So the something book of the blah. But actually, after the competition was finished, they were going to reveal that the correct answer was completely different. So absolutely nobody would get a chance to win the prizes. So they had to buy the book for 1 and 6, or 1 shilling and 6 pence, which is the equivalent to translated into modern money, that's I think 7.5 pence in modern money, but obviously it was worth a lot more back then. So people who send their 1 and 6 would get this book, and would send their competition entry hoping they'd maybe win, but the correct answers were nothing like what you'd think they were. So everybody lost the competition, and the proprietors of the competition pocketed the money, which sounds like something that they should have been arrested for, and they were. So this commenter has investigated the case, and they sold the Onryo's dream book, as well as the Dido dentrifice, which is like a toothpaste, Egyptian marking ink, and the petroline, which is supposed to be a type of hair gel, but was actually just written as a worthless compound. So yeah, it was run by the Wolf family. So George Gabriel Wolf and Sigmund Wolf were sent to prison, and Adolf Wolf was their young son, so he was involved in it too, but was too young to be put in prison. Those Adolfs, you can't trust them. So yeah, now that I've so anyway, back to the first page. As I said, these antique British story papers are my main area of interest, but so most of my collection of British story papers is in Britain, so I can't get to it at the moment. And the only 1890s to 1940s story papers I have available to me are all in Japanese, so I can only read little bits of them at the moment. But I can read plenty on here and do reviews of them. And when I get back to the UK, I'll get my bound volumes, and then World Comics Review will morph into almost entirely antique British comics review.